So thank you so much. I know you're constantly traveling on your way somewhere, on your way back from somewhere. So thank you for being so generous and taking time to educate my students.
No, hey, it's my pleasure.
Great. So let's get right into it. So you know, and by the way, for those of you who are participating in the AI for Good hackathon, would you raise your hands, please? Okay. And Charles Grosslight, who was the team? Who was the team that wound up winning? Any of your classmates here that won?
I guess not.
All right. Anyway. AI can be used for good as well as for bad, and that's really the point of today's discussion. Okay? So, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Most of you probably are too young to have seen this movie. How many have seen this movie? Okay. The person who voiced the computer, Hal, just was a classic Shakespearean actor with an incredible voice, and he just passed away this past week. Okay. But of course, the whole point of this was that computers could potentially do things that were not aligned with our interests, right? They could become smarter than us, and they could become irrelevant. And we've heard a lot of that over the last year or two from a lot of doomsayers like Musk, right? And this is very classic. You see 3D printing, you can have 3D printed guns, so right away 3D printing is a bad thing. So how would you describe sort of this debate, Susan, that's happening on the good and the bad and the ugly of AI?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is it's important to differentiate different types of AI. So one of the worst things you can do is walk into a room of engineers and technologists and ask them to define AI, because it's going to create a riot. Like, they're all going to be yelling at each other. Some people will define it kind of in a narrow way, meaning like it's a technology that can be used to solve specific kinds of problems, like predictive analytics and marketing, you know, which audiences are likely to respond to which kinds of campaigns. But even before 2001, like, you have to go back to like 1943, I want to say, when Isaac Asimov wrote this story called Runaround, in which he laid out the laws of robotics. And the 3 laws of robotics are like, robots can't do anything to harm human beings, and, you know, so on and so forth, which really influenced the way that we think about the technology. And the weird thing about this is that that's 7 years before Alan Turing writes Can Machines Think in 1950, and another 6 years later, Dartmouth actually coins, there's a conference at Dartmouth, and they coined the term artificial intelligence. So the weird thing about AI compared to a lot of other technologies is that we've been thinking about it in popular culture way longer than we've actually been using it. And so in a sense, most of us walking around, and any of you who end up working in AI and who go home and talk to your family, they're going to be like, are you going to want to work on the killer robot thing? And it's not really that. So there's this concept of artificial general intelligence, which is basically like sentient machines. That's like Skynet and Terminator and all that stuff. And 2001 and all that kind of Black Mirror, everything else, right? And then there's kind of what AI can really do. And any of you, like, have any of you seen yourselves, okay, probably not that many of you are like actively using Facebook, but then in the odd occurrence that you're using Facebook and you see it try to recognize your face, how many of you actually have had it recognize it incorrectly and tag you with somebody else, or tag friends with somebody else? I mean, it happens a lot. Okay, maybe not in this room, but it happens a lot. So there's the AGI thing, which is like not going to happen, right? We're not going to get sentient machines for hundreds of years probably. But there are these use cases, examples, ways that we can use AI that actually have some real potential benefit. So I don't like this idea of the singularity, like what's the exact date at which humans, you know, machines will overtake us, is kind of, in my opinion, it's kind of BS.
So let's talk about the anthropomorphization of AI today. So we had this chat. I had been at this VentureBeat conference, and the woman that runs the Alexa business talked about the fact that the entire design intent from day one was to make this as your friendly, trusted advisor, and to actually apply a Myers-Briggs personality to it. Okay, and so clearly their hope is to make this thing feel like it's your best friend in the house, right? Yeah, yeah. And then now we also have something that we had talked about as well, which is our good friends at Google brought us Duplex, and a lot of people freaked out. So can you talk a bit about the debate on this very important issue?
So one of the big ethics issues around AI technologies and machine learning is, should it try, because it can try to mimic humanity, should it try to mimic humanity, and under what circumstances? So So it's an issue because we're at a point now where we're not used to using these technologies in the same way that we will be 10 years from now. And if you think back, like, or you ask your parents about like the early days of the internet, people were like, I'm not putting my credit card on that thing, right? And so we all use PayPal now, we all use Venmo or whatever it is that we use. We really don't have that sense of friction around doing it. In the same way that we'll probably be interacting with voice agents in the future in a way that's more natural. However, we're not there right now. And so one of the big issues to me around Amazon's take and Google's take is that it's really kind of creepy. Like, have you guys seen the Google Duplex demonstration that Sundar Pichai did? Okay, so like, here's, and I'm going to—
Most of them probably haven't. You may want to just explain.
Okay, so let me explain what happened. So at Google, I would like, if you do nothing else, like watch this video. It's really interesting. So Sundar Pichai does this demo of what they call Google Duplex.
And that's the image you see behind you.
At Google I/O, at the big developer conference. And essentially he said, here's what happens. And the demo is a voice agent is pretending to be somebody's personal assistant, calling a salon to make an appointment for her client. Which, you know, for me happens all the time, right? I always have my personal assistant call my salon. Like, this is not a use case like everybody in this room is going to be using. Why would you actually pick up the phone, which is like, you know, 100-year-old technology to use, like 5-year-old technology? I don't get it. So anyway, so this is how it goes. You know, ring, ring, ring. Hello. Hi. I'm the personal assistant for so-and-so, and I'm calling to make a hair appointment. This is the chatbot speaking. Like, literally sounds like Kim Kardashian on a good day, right? And so I was like, okay, well, what time would you like your client to come in? Well, maybe like noon on, you know, October 10th. I'm sorry, we don't have anything available. Would 10 o'clock work? Mm-hmm. And like, so basically the chatbot is mimicking like, okay, yeah. And it has this very high, very feminized voice, which, you know, women in the room, hello, this is offensive, you know? Because every damn chatbot has to be a girl. Why is that? Because people did market research and said, yes?
There's also a male.
There are some males, I know, you can do it, but the default is because a lot of these companies did market research, and the market research found that people don't like being, you know, people like women to help them. They don't like feel comfortable with them helping them in the same way, right? So anyway, the long story short, there are issues around disclosure that have to do with being surprised, right? So if you're in the middle of an interaction, you know, one example would be like you're talking to your Alexa, or you're not Alexa, but you're talking to some kind of agent on the phone or in some other way through you know, whatever. And then you discover that the thing you've been interacting with for 3 weeks is not a person. Like, that's kind of weird. And especially if you were like, yeah, I have this mole on my leg, or, you know, I'm super overdrawn on my checking account, I don't know what to do. Like, these are sensitive issues. And so there was actually a story, there's actually a situation that happened in Reddit in the depression community and in the suicide watch community. And there was a bot introduced into the community called Coco that started interacting with people without telling them that it was a bot. People were like, has anybody met this new person, Coco? Has anybody chatted? And like somebody was like, yeah, Coco's not human. And they freaked out. So like, we're in that weird, icky stage now.
All right. Maybe we can extract it a little further and just ethics in customer interaction in general. Right, and all of the ways that companies are using chatbots to interact with prospects and customers, and from a customer support point of view, from a sales point of view.
Yeah, there are tons of good use cases. So like, and weirdly, like you don't, when you think about like who are the companies who are, you know, poised for disruptive innovation, like financial services and healthcare do not spring to mind. But those are the areas that are seeing the best kind of traction with voice agents and chatbots, because they have a ton of data. So this is what you need, right? You need a ton of data. You need to be able to process it cheaply. You need great algorithms. So if you have all those 3 things, you can get better and better and better. So if you have a call center, you have a ton of data. You understand like what are the most common things people call in for? How long does it take them to resolve it? What's in the knowledge base that tells us how to resolve it? So you see things like, you know, transferring money, or you know, doing payments, or even things like investor education, like you know, asking like, okay, I'm, you know, 28, I've had my, you know, credit card for 10 years, and I still don't totally know how an APR works. You know, you don't want to ask a person that. Same around like another chatbot that was used for depression management using cognitive behavioral therapy. This came out of Stanford. It's called Woebot, W-O-E-B-O-T, kind of cute. And it very clearly presents itself as a robot, as a chatbot. And when you interact with it, it gives you signals like, this is how I usually interact with humans, which most people I know would never say. So that's kind of an interesting thing because you start to see that in the design process, and I talked about this with folks at Microsoft, in the design process, people have to make these really clear decisions about what will make somebody feel the most comfortable, because part of the issue is when you're with a chatbot, you don't know what it knows, and you're talking to a voice agent, you don't have a screen to give you a visual cue about what you can do. So there's all this kind of design work happening too.
Deep learning is something that really freaks people out, right?
Yeah.
So can you talk about that? And I know Google just transferred their DeepMind healthcare business unit over to the core business, which freaked out the National Institutes of Health in the UK, and as you described, a lot more than that. Yeah. So talk a little bit about deep learning and some of the challenges that we face around ethics and deep learning.
Yeah, so there are different kinds of learning in AI, different kinds of ways to get an algorithm to learn. One is called supervised learning, where you're like, this is an apple, 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 this is a banana, this is a banana, this is, what's that, right? And oh yes, that's a banana, correct, that's now in the banana pile. And then there's, here are a bunch of apples, here are a bunch of bananas. You tell me what this other thing is, and it's like a car. And it's going to try to find out if it's an apple or a banana. This is, by the way, where you get all this race bias and ethnic bias and cultural bias that like gets sucked in. Which is, to me, one of the biggest issues around healthcare.
Yeah.
So on the positive side, so here's a bad news, good news story. So there was an article in the Atlantic a while ago that you can find that was about a doctor who was really concerned about AI actually increasing or decreasing the health outcomes for people of color around skin cancer specifically, because doctors are really bad at diagnosing skin cancer in people of color, or people in the way that they said it was like darker skin tones, and they have a whole apparently there's a range like Pantone sheet where you can kind of do the spectrum. And part of the reason is that they don't see it very often because it's a lower incidence health issue. But when they do see it, it's much more serious and has a higher mortality rate, possibly because it's being caught later. And so the doctor is saying, we're really concerned because if we're training an algorithm on skin cancer and it only understands what skin cancer looks like in Caucasians, it's going to assume that only Caucasians get skin cancer. It's going to ignore it in people of color, and people of color are going to die. And so that's the bad news, obviously. The good news is, he's like, how can we fix this? Well, we go get the data. So he's out there trying to create partnerships with hospitals in Africa and South Asia and Southeast Asia in order to be able to have a data set that reflects the full human spectrum of skin color. And once he does that, so that's good news. And here's the best news. The best news is once you do that, you can now deliver really low-cost digital skin cancer detection services to anybody, anywhere in the world. So that's where the disruptive innovation happens. This comes from a doctor's point of view. But that to me is the model for how we can kind of take what's bad about AI and turn it into something that's really positively, that really has positive consequences.